With his last mooch nickel, Burroughs sneaked off to the payphone and called the law of all the cheap, lousy tricks, Burroughs, to call the law on your old friends. We had a good thing here, Burroughs, good for another maybe 50,000 years, and you cheap little rat, called the law, so now we all have to pay. How you ever got to that phone beats the shit out of me. We had you covered, pegged out, cooled. Knocked out, blued, green, the lot. Where is Mary Cook? Who let this little bastard get to that phone? Of all the cheap tricks, Burroughs, of all the lousy, grassy rat tricks, with your last mooch nickel from Geisen, Burroughs called the law. So now we all have to pay. Smart little bastard stands there with his pockets inside out. Very funny, Burroughs, very funny. Sooner or later, some mark we thought we had cooled, or some little rat like Burroughs sneaks off and calls the heat on all of us. Now, Burroughs, you know why we never liked you. You guys, and what was wrong with both of you from the jump? Wrong bastards, wrong copper-loving bastards. Wise up the marks. Willie the rat has done it again. But how? Where was everybody when he sneaked off to that phone?
My first reading tonight is from Nova Express. Daddy Longlegs looked like Uncle Sam on stilts, and he ran this osteopath clinic outside East St. Louis and took in a few junkie patients. For 2 notes a week, they could stay on the nod in green lawn chairs and look at the oaks and grass stretching down to a little lake in the sun. The nurse moved around the lawn with her silver trays, feeding the junk in. We called her Mother, wouldn't you? Doc Benway and me was holed up there after a rumble in Dallas involving this aphrodisiac ointment. And Doc goofed on ether and mixed in too much Spanish fly and burned the prick off the police commissioner. So we come to Daddy Longlegs to cool off. Find him cool and casual in a dark room with potted rubber plants and a silver tray on the table where he likes to see a week in advance. The nurse shows us to a room with rose wallpaper. We have this bell. Any hour of the day or night, just ring, and the nurse charges in with a loaded hypo. Well, one day we are sitting out in the lawn chairs with lap robes. It's a fall day, leaves turning, sun cold on the lake. Doc picks up a piece of grass. Junk turns you on vegetable. It's green, see? Now, a green fix should last a long time. So we check out of the clinic and rent a house, and Doc starts cooking up this green junk. And the basement is full of tanks, smell like a compost heap of junkies. So finally, he draws off this heavy green fluid and loads it into a hypo big as a bicycle pump. Now we must find a worthy vessel, he says. And we flush out this old goofball artist and tell him it is pure Chinese H from the Ling dynasty. And Doc shoots the whole pint of green right into the main line. And the yellow jacket turns fibrous gray-green and withers up like an old turnip. And I say, I'm getting out of here, me. And Doc says, an unworthy vessel, obviously. I withdraw from the case. Thank you. The next selection is from a novel in progress entitled Cities of the Red Night. And this section is called Virus B-23. Virus B23 in the context of this novel is a virus that causes biologic mutations in those who recover from it. Except for junkies who stay exactly the same. Dr. Pearson was a discreet addict who kept himself down to 3 shots a day. Half a grain in each shot, he could always cover for that. Towards the end of an 8-hour shift, he tended to be perfunctory. So when he got the call from emergency, he hoped it wouldn't take long or keep him overtime. Of course, he could always slip a half grain under his tongue, but that was wasteful. And he liked to be in bed when he took his shot and feel it hit the back of his neck and move down the backs of his thighs while he blew cigarette smoke towards the ceiling. As he reached for his bag, he noticed that he had barked his knuckles. He couldn't remember where or when. That happens when you are feeling no pain. It looks like measles, Doctor. The doctor looked at the boy's face with distaste. He disliked children, adolescents, and animals. The word cute did not exist in his emotional vocabulary. There were red blotches on the boy's face, but they seemed rather large for measles. Well, get it in here, nurse, whatever it is, away from the other patients. Not that I care what they catch, it's just hospital procedure. The boy was wheeled into a cubicle. Fingers cold with distaste, the doctor folded the sheet down to the boy's waist and noticed that he was wearing no shorts. Why is he naked? He snapped at the attendants. Well, he was like that when they picked him up, Doctor. Well, they might have put something on him. He turned back to the attendants. What are you standing there for? Get out. And you, nurse, what are you gawking at? Order a bed in isolation. His temper was always evil when he ran over like this. But right after his shot, he could be nice in a dead, fishy way. The doctor turned back to the boy on the bed. His duty as a physician is clear. Hippocrates points sternly to the sheet. Well, I suppose I have to look at the little naked beast. He folded the sheet down to the boy's knees. The boy had an erection. The genitals and the area adjacent to the genitals were bright red, like a red bikini. The doctor leaped back as he would from a striking snake, but he was too late. A gob of semen hit the back of his hand right on the skin knuckles. He wiped it off with an exclamation of disgust. He recalled later that he felt a slight tingling sensation, which he didn't notice at the time. Being that disgusted with the human body, he wondered why he had chosen the medical profession. And this dirty child was delaying his fix. You filthy little beast, he snapped. The boy sniggered. The doctor pulled the sheet up to the boy's chin. He was washing his hands when the nurse came in with a stretcher table and an orderly to take the boy to isolation. The doctor sniffed. My God, what's that smell? I don't know what this is, nurse, but it's rather disgusting. He seems to be in some state of sexual delirium. He also seems to be giving out a horrible odor. Order the broad spectrum. Cortisone, of course. It may be an allergic condition. Red-haired animals are especially liable. And the usual antibiotics. If the sexual condition continues, do not hesitate to administer morphine. The doctor gasped and clasped a handkerchief in front of his mouth and nose. Get it out of here! He always referred to a patient as the disease. Do you have a typhoid bed in isolation? Not now, we don't. Well, it can't stay here. He had barely settled in bed after his fix when the phone rang. It was the super. Seems we have an epidemic on our hands, Doctor. All staff report back to the hospital immediately. Could it be that dirty little boy, he thought as he dressed and picked up his satchel and walked to the hospital. He saw there was a police line around the entrance. "Oh, yes, Doctor, right over there for your mask." "I'll help you put it on, Doctor." A brisk young girl in some sort of uniform rubbed her tits against him in a most offensive manner. Before she got the mask on, he smelled it and he knew it was that dirty little boy. Inside was a scene from Dante. Stretchers side by side in the corridors, sperm all over the sheets, the walls, and the floor. "Be careful, Doctor," a garrulous old nurse caught his arm in time. "Just put one foot solidly in front of the other, Doctor. That's right." "It's terrible, Doctor. The older patients are dying like flies." "I don't want to hear any generalities, nurse. Take me to my ward." "Well, Doctor, you can have the northeast wing if you want, right here." Every sort of copulation was going on in front of him. Every disgusting thing they could think of. Some of them had pillowcases and towels wrapped around each other's necks in some kind of awful contest. As some of these crazed patients seemed in danger of strangulation, the doctor almost slipped in shit. He ordered attendants to restrain them, but no attendants were available. "Well, we'll start with morphine and a curare derivative, nurse." "Sorry, Doctor, the morphine stocks are exhausted on the older patients. They go into the most awful spasms at the end, Doctor." At this terrible pronouncement, the doctor turned pale as death. He slumped to the floor in a faint, his face covered with red blotches. By the time they got his clothes off, his body was also affected, and spontaneous orgasms were observed. "Most distasteful thing I ever stand still for," he told himself later, "but it's still an easy score." He recovered from the fever because of his addiction, and the word went out that junk was the only insurance against the fever. No stemming the black market, the government concedes and legalizes. Now begins a deadly war of extermination between the junkies and the fever freaks. Here's the old junkie CO taking the young lieutenant on his rounds. "They're out there, son." He points beyond the barbed wire and the gun turrets. "Waiting, watching, catching every filthy thing in their diseased minds and bodies. They'll sell you red hots for junk, kill you in a nasty sex spasm. They want a fever world. That's what we have to deal with out here. Well, perhaps sometime, somewhere, the human race will remember that a few white men stood between them and the fever freaks." What an old windbag, the boy thought. Where's my fix? "We're on short rations here, son. Quarter G 3 times a day." "Captain, that is short." "We have to ration it, son. God help us if we ever run out and fall into their hands." "Swear you'll kill me first, sir." "Of course, son. The Army always takes care of its own." The lieutenant thought of all those dirty monsters out there, a threat to everything he held dear. Cut him down to a lousy quarter G, would they? Next reading is from the Wild Boys. The Green Nun has stopped the unfortunate traveler in front of her red brick priory, set among oak trees, green lawns, and flower beds. "Oh, do come in and see my mental ward and the wonderful things we are doing for the patients." She walks with him up the gravel drive to the priory door, pointing to her flowers. Aren't my primroses doing nicely? She opens the door of the priory with a heavy brass key at her belt. Down a long hall and flight of stairs, she opens another door with her keys. She shows Audrey into a bare, cold wardroom, crayon drawings on the wall. A nun walks up and down with a ruler. The patients are busy with plasticine and crayons. It looks like a kindergarten, but some of the children are middle-aged. The door clicks shut and her voice changes. You'll find plasticine and crayons over there. You must have permission to leave the room for any purpose. Now see here. A paunchy guard with a tin helmet and wide leather belt stands beside her. And so the years passed. Sometimes, as a special treat, there were nature walks in the garden. Bob, the guard there, with 3 snarling Alsatians on a lead. The patients could watch a praying mantis eat her mate. Converted patients were allowed a quarter grain of morphine every night before lights out, a privilege which could be withdrawn at any trespass. Daily confessions were heard by the green nun on a lie detector. That could also give a very nasty shock in the nasty places while the green nun intoned slowly, "Thou shalt not bear false witness." These confessions she wrote out in green ink, keeping a separate ledger book for each patient. Once, after a particularly degraded confession, she levitated to the ceiling in the presence of an awed young nun. Every night she put on Christ drag with a shimmering halo and visited some young nun in her cell. She liked to think of herself as the nun in a poem by Sarah Teasdale. Infinite tenderness, infinite irony is hidden forever in her closed eyes, who must have learned too well in her long loneliness how empty wisdom is, even to the wise. She was an inveterate hypochondriac and dosed herself liberally with laudanum. As a result, she suffered from chronic constipation, which could put a comely young nun on high colonic duty. This honor was invariably followed by a nocturnal visit from Christ with a strap-on. In her youth, the green nun had toyed with the idea of ordering Bob to raid a sperm bank. Then she could claim the Christ child. But she put aside these ambitious thoughts. Her work in the kindergarten was more important than worldly glamour. Her picture on the cover of Life. Dizzy dance of rooms and faces, murmur of many voices, smell of human nights. St. Louis backdrop of red brick houses, slate roofs, backyards, and ash pits. As a child, he had an English governess with references so impeccable that Audrey later suspected they had been forged by a Fleet Street hack in a shabby pub near Earl's Court. You can't put in too many lords and lighties, I always sigh. Listening back with a writer's crystal set, he picked up mutters of the servant underworld, the pimping, blackmailing chauffeur. You don't get rid of me that easy, Lord Brambletie. Overdose of morphine in a Kensington nursing home. She said that Mrs. Charrington was sleeping and could not be disturbed. The governess left quite suddenly after receiving a letter from England. Next selection is also from the Wild Boys Hymn. Here in the middle of a film to find myself one of the actors. The chief has asked me to his house for dinner. Around 8, Rogers. Help yourself to a drink, Rogers. He gestured to the drink wagon. There's Keef, of course, if you want it. I mixed myself a short drink and declined the Keef. It gives me a headache. I'd seen the chief smoking with his Arab contacts, but that didn't give me a license to smoke. Besides, it does give me a headache. The chief's cover story is an eccentric old French comte who is translating the Koran into Provençal. And sometimes he will pull cover and bore his guest catatonic. You see, he really knows Provençal in Arabic. The chief wasn't pulling cover tonight. He was expansive, and watch your step, Rogers, I told myself, sipping a weak scotch. So I think you're the man for a highly important, and I may add highly dangerous assignment, Rogers. You fell for that crap. Well, sir, he is impressive, I said cautiously. He's a cheap old ham, said the chief. He sat down and filled his keep pipe with one hand. He smoked and blew the ash out, absently caressing a gazelle that nuzzled his knee. Gotta stay ahead of the commies, or everybody's kids will be learning Chinese. What a windbag. I endeavored to look noncommittal. Have you any idea what we're doing here, Rogers? Well, no, sir. I thought not. Never tell them what you want until you've got them where you want them. I'm going to show you a documentary film. Well, I happened onto this good thing through a Mexican shoeshine boy. You, Kiki, come out here and show Mr. Rogers how pretty you are. Kiki stands in the doorway smiling. Now that lad, he's a doll, isn't he? He's one of the best deep trance mediums I have ever handled. Through him, I was able to teleport myself to a Mayan set and bring back the pictures. The whole thing was so frantic, I cooled it all the way up in my reports. All I said was, it looks like a lovely whoop. That's code for weapon of unlimited potential. Now, he's hotting up now. The old priest rocks back and forth. His lips part, and a dry insect music buzzes out. It's known as singing the pictures. The principle is alternating current. Now, that old fuck can alternate pain and pleasure on a subvocal, perhaps even a molecular level, 60 times a second. Goading the natives around on stock probs into the prearranged molds laid down in the sacred books. Now, a few singers can deliver direct current, and they are only called in an emergency. The control system you have just seen broke down. This happened quite suddenly. A whole generation was born that felt neither pain nor pleasure. There were no soldiers to bring captives from other tribes, since soldiers would have endangered the control machine. They relied entirely on local criminals for the pain and pleasure pictures. As a last resort, they called in the incomparable yellow serpent. The serpent is carried in on his amber throne, blue snake eyes, skin like yellow parchment, 2 long serpent fangs grafted into the upper jaw. As the current pulses through him, he begins to rock back and forth. He shifts from AC to DC. A thin siren wail breaks from his lips, now open to the yellow fangs. Death! 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 The pictures crash and leap from his eyes, blasting worker and priest alike to smoldering fragments. Death! 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 A thin siren wail rises and falls over empty cities. This secret of the ancient Mayans, which few are competent to practice. When comes such another singer as the old yellow serpent? Now, the technical department think we are all as crazy as our way of life is reprehensible. Bring us the ones that work, they say. Facts, figures, personnel. Put that joker Death on the line. Take care of Mayo and his gang of cutthroats. I was privileged to assist, in a manner of speaking, at the Yellow Serpent's last broadcast in Washington, D.C. Room in the Pentagon. Generals, CIA, State Department fidget about with that top secret, hottest thing ever look, open line to the President, strategic and NATO standing by. The old Yellow Serpent is carried in by 4 Marine guards. He begins to rock back and forth. He breathes in baby cousins, breathes out death rattles. He sucks in wheat fields and spits out dust bowls. He's just warming up, says a CIA man to a 5-star general. The old Serpent shifts to D.C. blazing like a comet. Death, death, death. The pictures lash and crackle from his eyes. Death, death, death. A wall blows out, spilling brass 18 floors to the street. Death, death, death. And now the Serpent swings his whip in the sky. Here live stupid, vulgar sons of bitches who thought they could hire death as a company cop. Empty streets, old newspapers in the wind, a rustle of darkness and wires. This is from Exterminato. It's called The Evening News, a poem. It was written in Marrakesh, and I put in a few French phrases from the daily horoscope for that day, and I'll translate those when I come to them. And also there's a reference here to the Mayan god of death, Apuk. The old desk sergeant looked grimly at the wanted pictures, yellow, peeling, 30th day without an arrest in New York area. They risk 15 light years, entire future, certain discussions, cool gardens and pools of the evening. The old turnkey makes the round of empty cells. Sleep tight, boys, no one there. Muttering phantom voices, Pete men, junkies, con men, the old hop-smoking worlds mutter between years. The sailor hanging by his belt, a drunk banging on the door of his cell. Thin gray pickpocket stops him. Get me this letter out, screw, it's worth an abe to you. Pulls the abe out of his fibrous junkie shoe. I need an arrest, Mike, I'm thin. Fuck off, punk, I can't find an old drunk. No arrest. She reads it in his dull eyes. Conserve toujours un bon moral. Always conserve a good morale. A sharp, cold bray of laughter sliding away into the sky. Couldn't reach from the old cop film. Twirling his club down cobblestone streets, the sky goes out against his back. In a darkening park, couldn't reach with a sap. I do not need to remind you, laws as strict as the United States, urine in straw, a yellow sky, his bicycle of light, poumons sensibles, susceptible lungs, a blue smell of hope as he rounded the corner and the sea air hit his face. Leaving the fading film, please, got up, remembered, thank you. The old courthouse, empty cells and precincts, bondsmen, judges, lawyers, probation officers, paper cups of coffee on the desk. Narcotics department. The door is open, files and pictures scattered on the floor, stained with urine and excrement. On the wall in phosphorus roach paste. Poop, jacked off here. Laws as severe as the United States. L'indécision ne servirait pas votre cause ce soir. The indecision will not serve your cause this evening. Last reading is also from the Wild Boys. At Tent City, a top-level conference is in progress involving top-level executives in the control game. The conference has been called by a Texas billionaire who contributes heavily to MRA and keeps a stable of evangelists. This conference is taking place outside St. Louis, Missouri, because the Green Nun flatly refuses to leave her kindergarten. The conference is discussing Operation WOG, Wrath of God. At the top level, people get cynical after a few drinks. The young man from the news magazine has discovered a good-looking Fulbright scholar, and they are witty in a corner over martinis. A drunken American sergeant reels to his feet. He has the close-cropped iron gray hair and ruddy complexion of the regular army man. To put it country simple for a lay audience, you don't even know what buttons to push. We take a bunch of long-hair boys fucking each other while they puff reefers, spit cocaine on the Bible, and wipe their asses with Old Glory. We show this film to decent, church-going, Bible Belt do-rights, and we take the reaction. One religious sheriff with 7 nigger notches on his gun melted the camera lens. He turned out to be quite an old character, and the boys from Life did a spread on him. Seems it had always been in the family, a power put there by God to smite the unrighteous. His grandmother struck a whore dead in the street with it. When we showed the picture to a fat Southern senator, his eyes popped out, throwing fluid all over your photographer. Well, I've been asparagus in Paris, kneed in the groin by the Sea Org in Tunis, maced in Chicago, and pelted with scorpions in Marrakesh. So a face full of frog eggs is all in a day's work. Now, it's what the narco boys call society's disapproval, reflected and concentrated. 20 million I hate you pictures in one blast. When you want the job done, come to the United States of America, and we can turn it in any direction. You limey has-beens. He points to a battery of old gray men in club chairs, frozen in stony disapproval of this vulgar, drunken American. You're nothing but a banana republic. And remember, we've got your pictures. And we've got yours too, Yank. Mine are uglier than yours. The English cough and look away, fading into their spectral clubs, yellowing tusks of the beast killed by the improbable hyphenated name. Old Sarge screams after them, "What do you think this is, a beauty contest? You Fabian socialist vegetable peoples. Go back to your garden in Hempstead and release a hot air balloon in defiance of a local ordinance. Delightful encounter with a bobby in the morning. Mom's wrote it all up in her diary and read it to us at tea. We got all your pansy pictures at Eton. You want to jack off in front of the Queen with a candle up your ass? You can't talk like that in front of decent women," drawled the Texas billionaire, flanked by his rangers. "You decorticated cactus. I suppose you think this conference was your idea. Compliments of Sid in the Sudden Inspiration Department. And you," he points to the Green Nun, "write out 10,000 times underwater in indelible ink. Old Sarge has my Christ pictures. Shall I show them to the Pope? And now, in the name of all good tech sergeants everywhere, Old Sarge is taking over. He looks around and the crockery flies off every table, spattering the conference with martinis, bourbon, whipped cream, maraschino cherries, gravy, and vichyssoise. Frozen forever in a 1920 slapstick. Thank you. short piece. This is also from Exterminator. It's called From Here to Eternity. Mildred Pierce reporting. I was there. I saw it. I saw women thrown down on Fifth Avenue and raped in their mink coats by blacks and whites and yellows while street urchins stripped the rings from their fingers. A young officer stood nearby. Aren't you going to do something? I demanded. He looked at me and yawned. I found Colonel Bradshaw bivouacking in the Ritz. I told him bluntly what was going on. His eyes glinted shamelessly as he said, well, you have to take a broad general view of things. And that's what I have been doing, taking a broad general view of American troops raping and murdering helpless civilians, while American officers stand around and yawn. Been at it a long time, lady. It's the old Army game, from here to eternity. This license was dictated by considerations taken into account by prudent commanders throughout history. It pays to pay the boys off. Even the noble Brutus did it. Points with his left hand in catatonic limestone. The town is yours, soldier brave. Tacitus describes a typical scene. If a woman or a good-looking boy fell into their hands, they were torn to pieces in the struggle for possession, and the survivors were left to cut each other's throats. Mother-loving American army run by old women, many of them religious, my God, hanging American soldiers for raping and murdering civilians. Old Sarge bellows from here to eternity. What the bloody fucking hell are civilians for? Soldiers pay. The CO stands there and smiles. Just ahead is a Middle Western town on a river. 30,000 civilians. The CO points. It's all yours, boys, every man, woman, and child. God is nigh. Let's get us some civvies. Now, just a minute, boys. Listen to old Sarge. Why make the usual stupid scene, kicking in liquor stores, grabbing anything in sight? You wake up hungover in an alley, you're prick sore from fucking dry cunts and assholes. Your eye gouged out by a broken beer bottle. Yeah, you and your asshole buddy wanted the same piece of ass. No fun in that. Why not leave it like this? They go about their daily routines, business as usual, schools all open. You see what I mean? And we just take what we want when we want it. Cool and steady and easy, and make them like it. The young lieutenant from camouflage sees what he means. Boys, swimming pools and locker rooms full of them. Getting it steady year after year. Now that's what I call pay.